In an emotional and deeply revealing moment that has captured global attention, Jimin of BTS has once again proven why his voice resonates far beyond music. In a recent full-length interview, Jimin opened up in a way that left millions of fans around the world visibly moved, many even brought to tears. The interview, which quickly went viral across multiple platforms, showcased a side of Jimin that fans have always admired but rarely get to see in such depth. Calm, reflective, and sincere, he spoke not just as a global superstar, but as a human being navigating pressure, expectations, and the weight of immense love from millions. From the very beginning, Jimin's tone set the atmosphere. There was no rush in his words, no attempt to impress, only honesty. He reflected on his journey from a young dreamer in Busan to becoming one of the most recognized faces in global pop culture. But rather than focusing on achievements, he chose to talk about vulnerability. "I think people often see the stage version of me," he said softly, pausing between sentences. "But offstage I'm still learning, still questioning, still growing." That simple admission struck a chord instantly. Fans flooded social media with clips, quoting his words and sharing their emotional reactions. Many expressed how comforting it was to hear someone so successful admit that they don't have everything figured out. As the interview progressed, Jimin spoke about the pressure of perfection, something he has been associated with throughout his career. Known for his flawless performances and meticulous attention to detail, he revealed that behind that perfection lies a constant inner struggle. "There were times I felt like I wasn't enough," he admitted. "Even when people said I did well, I would go back and think about what I could have done better." This level of honesty created a powerful moment. It wasn't just about music anymore. It became a conversation about self-worth, about the silent battles many people fight every day. Viewers around the world related deeply, seeing themselves reflected in his words. The most emotional part of the interview came when Jimin began talking about fans. His expression softened, his voice quieter, almost fragile. "They give me so much love," he said. "Sometimes I wonder if I deserve it." That single sentence sent shockwaves across the fandom. For many, it was heartbreaking to hear someone so adored question their worth. Fans responded immediately, trending hashtags dedicated to reminding him just how much he means to them. He continued, explaining that the love he receives is something he never takes for granted. In fact, he carries it with him in everything he does. "When I'm tired, when I feel lost, I think about them," he shared. "And it gives me strength. It reminds me why I started." Throughout the interview, there was a recurring theme: gratitude mixed with introspection. Jimin didn't present himself as someone who has overcome everything, but rather as someone who is still on the journey. He spoke about moments of doubt, about nights where he questioned his path, and about the importance of having people around him who understand. His members, he mentioned briefly, play a huge role in keeping him grounded. "We support each other in ways people might not always see," he said. And that makes a difference. Clips from the interview spread, fans began creating compilations of his most touching moments. Comments poured in from different parts of the world, different languages, different cultures, but the same emotional response. "He made me cry. I feel understood. I needed to hear this today." The impact was undeniable. Experts in media and pop culture have pointed out that what makes moments like this so powerful is authenticity. In an industry often driven by image, Jimin's willingness to be open created a rare connection, one that feels genuine and unfiltered, and perhaps that is why his words hit so deeply. At one point in the interview, he was asked what he hopes people feel when they listen to his music. His answer was simple yet profound: "I hope they feel less alone." That line has since become one of the most shared quotes from the interview. Fans have turned it into captions, edits, and even artwork, symbolizing the comfort his presence brings. As the interview came to a close, Jimin left viewers with a quiet message, one that didn't feel scripted but rather spoken straight from the heart. "Even if things are hard right now," he said gently, "it's okay. You're doing well just by holding on." For many, that final statement was the breaking point. Tears, messages, and emotional reactions flooded timelines worldwide. It wasn't just an interview anymore, it had become a moment of healing. In the hours following its release, the interview dominated trending charts. Media outlets began covering the story, highlighting not just the content but the reaction it sparked. Analysts noted how rare it is for a single conversation to create such a widespread emotional response. But for fans, the reason was clear: it wasn't about fame, it wasn't about success, it was about honesty. Jimin reminded people that behind every spotlight is a human being, someone who feels, who doubts, who hopes. And in doing so, he gave millions permission to feel the same way. As discussions continue and clips keep circulating, one thing remains certain. This interview will be remembered not just as a promotional appearance but as a defining moment, a moment where words mattered, a moment where vulnerability became strength, a moment where one voice reached millions and truly made them feel seen. And perhaps in a world that often feels overwhelming, that is exactly what people needed to hear. As the emotional impact of the interview continued to ripple across the globe, the conversation around Jimin's words began to evolve into something even bigger. It was no longer just about a single moment of vulnerability. It became a reflection of the deeper connection between an artist and the people who support him. In the hours following the broadcast, fan communities mobilized in a way that was both powerful and heartfelt. Messages of support flooded every corner of the internet. From long handwritten letters shared online to short but meaningful posts, millions of people expressed the same sentiment: gratitude. Many fans began sharing their own personal stories, how Jimin's music helped them through difficult times, how his words gave them comfort during moments of doubt, and how seeing his honesty made them feel less alone in their struggles. For some, it was more than just admiration. It was understanding. "I thought I was the only one who felt like that," one fan wrote, "but hearing him say it out loud made me feel seen." That sense of shared emotion quickly turned into a global movement of empathy. Hashtags continued to trend, not just celebrating Jimin but encouraging others to open up about their own experiences. In an unexpected way, the interview sparked conversations about mental health, self-acceptance, and the importance of emotional honesty. Observers noted how rare it is for a single interview to create such a widespread emotional dialogue. In an industry often dominated by polished images and carefully curated messages, this moment stood out for its sincerity. And at the center of it all was Jimin, quietly reminding the world that vulnerability is not weakness but strength. As discussions grew, many began revisiting Jimin's past interviews and performances, noticing a consistent pattern in his words. There has always been a softness in the way he speaks, a thoughtfulness in the way he expresses himself. But this time it felt different, this time it felt deeper. Clips from the interview were replayed over and over again, each time revealing something new, a pause, a subtle change in expression, a moment where his voice slightly trembled. These small details made the experience feel even more real, more human. Media analysts pointed out that authenticity like this cannot be manufactured. It comes from lived experience, from genuine reflection, and from the courage to speak openly. And that courage is exactly what resonated. As days passed, the emotional wave did not fade. Instead, it transformed into something more lasting. Fan projects began to emerge, dedicated to sending messages of support back to Jimin. Digital billboards, video compilations, and global campaigns were organized, all with the same goal: to remind him that he is appreciated, valued, and deeply loved. Interestingly, the narrative had shifted. At first, people were moved by Jimin's words, now they wanted to respond to them. He said he wonders if he deserves the love, another fan shared. So let's show him clearly and loudly that he does. This exchange, this unspoken dialogue between artist and audience, highlighted something unique about the relationship Jimin has built over the years. It is not one-sided. It is mutual, evolving, and deeply emotional. Meanwhile, industry experts began discussing the broader implications of the interview. Some described it as a turning point, a reminder that audiences today crave authenticity more than ever. In a time where everything moves fast and attention is fleeting, moments that feel real have the power to stand still. And this was one of those moments. Jimin's words also sparked conversations beyond the world of entertainment. Educators, psychologists, and public speakers referenced the interview as an example of how openness can create connection. His message, simple yet profound, transcended language and cultural barriers. "I hope they feel less alone." Words continued to echo, reaching people far beyond the original audience. In quieter corners of the internet, individuals shared how the interview helped them process their own emotions. Some admitted they hadn't cried in a long time until they heard Jimin speak. Others said it gave them the courage to talk about things they had been holding in. It became clear that this was more than just content, it was impact. As the story continued to unfold, attention turned to what might come next. Would Jimin address the overwhelming response? Would there be another interview, another message? But perhaps that wasn't necessary, because sometimes a single moment is enough, a single conversation, a single voice, a single truth, and in this case that truth was simple. Even the brightest stars have their doubts, and even the strongest people need reassurance. Yet instead of diminishing him, that truth made him even more admirable. Because it takes courage to stand in front of the world and say, "I'm still figuring things out." It takes even more courage to do it knowing millions are listening. As the coverage began to slow, one thing remained unchanged: the emotional imprint left behind. This interview will likely be remembered not for its headlines, but for its honesty, not for its reach, but for its depth, and most importantly, not for the tears it caused, but for the comfort it brought afterward. In the end, Jimin didn't just speak, he connected. And in doing so, he reminded millions of people around the world of something incredibly important: that it's okay to be vulnerable. That it's okay to question yourself, and that even in moments of doubt, you are never truly alone. Closing line: because sometimes the most powerful words aren't the loudest ones, they're the ones that quietly reach your heart and stay there. As the story continued to unfold, something remarkable began to take shape, not just within fan communities but across a much wider audience. People who were not even familiar with Jimin or his work found themselves drawn into the conversation. Clips of the interview appeared on timelines, recommended feeds, and news segments, each carrying the same emotional weight. It became clear that this was no longer just a moment for fans, it was a moment for everyone. Viewers from different backgrounds, different ages, and different cultures began to relate to the same core message. The specifics of Jimin's life, his career, his fame, his global recognition faded into the background. What remained was something universal: the experience of self-doubt, the search for meaning, and the quiet hope that we are enough as we are. In many ways, the interview bridged a gap. It reminded people that emotions do not belong to one group or one community. They are shared, understood, and felt across all boundaries. In the days that followed, several commentators highlighted how rare it is for a global figure to speak with such unfiltered honesty. There were no grand statements, no dramatic declarations, just simple truths spoken sincerely, and sometimes that is far more powerful. One segment that continued to circulate widely was the moment Jimin paused before answering a question about happiness. It was a brief silence, but one that spoke volumes. When he finally responded, his words were thoughtful, almost careful. "I think happiness isn't something that stays," he said. "It comes and goes, so when it's here I try to appreciate it." That perspective resonated deeply with viewers. It shifted the idea of happiness from something permanent to something fleeting, and therefore something to be cherished in the moment. For many, it was a refreshing way to look at life. Rather than chasing constant perfection or endless positivity, Jimin's words suggested something more realistic, something more human. Accept the highs, endure the lows, and appreciate the moments in between. As discussions grew, mental health advocates began referencing the interview as an example of how public figures can influence emotional awareness. Without using complex language or formal terms, Jimin managed to communicate ideas that are often difficult to express. He didn't try to teach, he simply shared, and that made all the difference. Meanwhile, fans continued to organize projects in response to the interview's impact. Some created video compilations combining his words with meaningful imagery. Others translated the interview into multiple languages, ensuring that people from all over the world could understand his message. It became a collective effort, one driven not by obligation but by genuine emotion. At the same time, there was a growing sense of protectiveness among fans. Many expressed concern over the vulnerability Jimin had shown, hoping that he would not feel overwhelmed by the intensity of the response. But alongside that concern was reassurance. They wanted him to know that his honesty was not a burden, it was a gift that had helped millions. As media coverage continued, journalists began to shift their focus. Instead of simply reporting on the interview, they started exploring its meaning. Articles were written analyzing the emotional impact, the cultural significance, and the broader message behind Jimin's words. Some described it as a defining moment in modern pop culture, where the line between artist and audience blurred, creating a shared emotional experience. Others called it a reminder that even in a fast-paced digital world, sincerity still matters. And perhaps that is why this moment continues to linger, because it wasn't created for attention. It wasn't designed to go viral. It simply happened, naturally, honestly, and without pretense. As the conversation slowly began to settle, one question remained in the minds of many: what comes after a moment like this? For some artists, such a deeply emotional reveal might be followed by silence, a step back, a moment of reflection. For others, it becomes a turning point, shaping the way they communicate moving forward. With Jimin, however, there is a sense that this is not a sudden change, but rather a continuation of who he has always been: someone who feels deeply, someone who thinks carefully, someone who speaks when it matters most. And perhaps that is what makes his words so impactful. They are not frequent, but when they come, they carry weight. As the final echoes of the interview continue to resonate, fans and viewers alike are left with something more than just memories of an emotional moment. They are left with a message, a quiet, steady reminder that growth is not linear, that doubt does not define you, and that even in uncertainty there is strength in continuing forward. In a world that often demands certainty, confidence, and constant progress, Jimin offered something different. He offered honesty, and in doing so he created a space where people could pause, reflect, and simply feel. Closing reflection: maybe that is the true power of moments like this, not the headlines, not the numbers, not even the tears, but the connection, the understanding that somewhere someone else feels the same way, and that sometimes is enough to keep going. End of segment.